warm welcome to Arvell Craig.
Sir. Hello? Can you hear me? I don't hear myself, but how's everybody doing? Great. Thank you all for waking up and being here. Got a little slim crowd. I knew it was going to happen, but definitely want to wake you up. You need to be woken up. And it's been a great conference. It's been a great event. It's funny. I feel like the theme of this event is like AI. I keep hearing about artificial intelligence. I know Ethan's coming later to talk about AI, and it's just so much going on. So I decided this morning, instead of talk about what I was going to talk about, what if I just asked ChatGPT some questions about call deliverability and see what he had. Have y'all heard of ChatGPT? Yes. A few people? Yeah. So ChatGPT is this new AI. It's like the hottest thing in the world of marketing and communications, like a free beta thing. You can ask it any question. It's like Google with a brain or Siri with a brain. So I asked ChatGPT this morning. So I have a call center, and my caller IDs are marked as spam or scam likely. What can I do to remove the spam flags? So the bot automatically said, okay, it says, your caller ID has been marked as spam or scam likely. It can be frustrating and negatively impact your ability to reach customers. Here are a few things you can do to remove the spam flags. Number 1, verify your phone number. Number 2, use a business phone number. Number 3, blah, blah, blah. So I actually had some fairly, okay answers. But one thing about ChatGPT and this kind of AI, you can train it. You can ask it more questions, or you can edit your question. So my follow-up was like, I own a telemarketing company, and the calls I make are not my customers, but prospects for my clients. How would you change your advice? And then ChatGPT tells me, if you own a telemarketing company and the calls you make are not to your customers, but rather to prospects for your clients, then your approach to avoid being marked as spam will be slightly different. Here are a few suggestions. Number 1, get express written consent from the prospect before you call. Federal regulations like TCPA require telemarketing companies to get written consent for people you're calling. Blah, blah, blah. Number 2, provide an easy opt-out mechanism. Federal regulations require you to provide an easy way for them to opt out. Blah, 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 blah. Wow. Number 3, use accurate caller ID information. It's important to use accurate caller IDs. Number 4, it was pretty fascinating that it actually gave me some good information. So I figured I had to bring some AI to my talk because everybody's talking about AI. So just wanted to do that to kind of make it a little different. So again, good morning. My name is Arvell Craig. I'm with Contact Center Compliance. And let's talk about getting your calls reached and reaching customers in 2023. So my role is I run the consulting department. So whenever customers need like hands-on, like a virtual compliance officer, I kind of jump in there and help our customers who mainly use our software understand regulations such as TCPA, DNC, TSR, things like that. And so if you don't know about Contact Center Compliance or DNC.com, we've been around in this industry for over 20 years. We've scrubbed over 84 billion records and numbers, so we are the leader when it comes to DNC compliance. We also help customers like scrub for litigators and things like that. And in our 20 years of history, there's been 0 violations or fines or lawsuits for TCPA or DNC or things like that. So we're really proud of what we do. And so I like to give the background of who we are, because some people wonder, so how does that relate to caller ID? How does that relate to making sure that our numbers get clean? So one of the things I've come to recognize that there's a direct correlation between your compliance and what you're doing in-house and the data that you're calling. If the data is compliant, if your operations are compliant, and whether or not your calls are being reached or your customers are being reached, your calls are getting through. And it's really fascinating. And so what I want to do was unpack for you some of the things that we've learned from working with our customers. Like, what are those features, those factors that actually make a difference? To me, it's like, where does the compliance, where does the data, where do those things come into place that's going to help you to reach your customers? So, now normally I like to make my presentations interactive. I know some of you guys are on your phone, you're doing your work, and it's so good. But at least show hands, any of you have a call center? Is this relevant for anybody? Okay, just want to make sure that actually relates to you, that I can actually provide you some value. I've only got 27 and a half minutes. So, and it's actually a lot of information, but my goal is to take the complex and make it simple, kind of take the unseen, make it visible. Probably wrong there. So, and that's kind of what I want to do, make it really simple. And so the goal for you, hopefully you can take some notes, take some snapshots, and some of these slides are going to be important for you if you want to know specifically what you need to do at your company to make sure that your calls go through. So let's get into it. Most of us know that spam is an issue. Everybody know robocalls and everything. I got this from UMail and the FTC's website saying, it might have been 2 years ago data, but still relevant. There's billions and billions of robocalls. And you can see here, robocalls is a generic term. There's no real definition of a robocall, and it's not, robocall doesn't mean illegal, right? Only one of these, you see there's 4 different types of robocalls in this chart. Only one type you can say is illegal, right? Scam calls, which is the largest one, which is really the reason why all the regulations and why calls are being regulated, because they want to avoid the scam calls. But again, there's alerts, reminders, payment reminders, and telemarketing. Right. So again, but everybody hates robocalls, and that's the reason, why we have to figure out what we need to do legal robocalls, compliant robocalls, not look like or emulate or act like the people who are scammers. That's kind of the key that I really want you all to think about, even for the rest of the year. It's like, almost like compliance is not, like so many people say, we are a TCPA compliant company. We have TCPA compliant leads, as if that's like the gold star. Compliance is like your bare minimum. We're like, hey, we're legal. That's what you're saying. When you say, I have TCPA compliant leads, you're saying, I have legal calls. These are not illegal, as if that's something to be proud of, right? So what we really have to understand as regulations increase and fines increase, and now it's just not about the money, the regulators, FCC is actually affecting, AT&T and T-Mobile. They're like affecting the actual technology. So it's not just the direct penalties and fines. You have to deal with the actual providers and carriers who are going to stop you and hinder you from making money. So again, compliance is just the baseline. It is not like the gold standard. You really have to figure out as a company, as a brand, how are you building trust between you and your clients, between you and customers. And if you are a white label, BPO, it's not your brand, it's not your business. You have to find a way to raise the game other than just being quote unquote compliant. All right, so again, everybody wants to stop robocalls, and the threat to you is going to be there's fines from the government and PR announcements and things like that come out. You find litigation. We all know about attorneys or people who are professional plaintiffs that try to, sue you for a living. But again, now we're dealing with call blocking and labeling, where it's beyond just the penalties and fines. We have the actual technology that's going to try to restrict you and warn you. But again, like I said, it's not about just compliance or non-compliance. You need to not act like a scammer. You need to figure out what are the details that actually make a difference so that you don't look like, you're making legal calls. And I don't know if you saw this on TCPA World, it came out on November 22nd, was the fact that a carrier who didn't follow all the rules and protocols for stir shaking the robocall mitigation database, they were somewhat blacklisted. So they were like removed. So every customer that was using this specific VoIP provider, this gateway to make their calls, got shut down. So again, it's like, I want you to understand that the things are changing. There's more enforcement happening. And so you really want to understand what do you need to do to get your calls through. So again, and for many people, it's kind of a black box when it comes to what actually does it take to get my calls to come through. Normally when I have this kind of conversation in the event, I'll ask people, what are you doing? Are you rotating your numbers? Are you buying more numbers? Are you resting them? Are you using FCR website? Everybody has a different opinion. However, what I want to do is take that black box and kind of share with you some of the things that we realize. So I've got 3 major categories that I want to talk to you about, specifically about what you need to do to get your calls to come through. The first one here is you need to actually see what's going on. Like I said, take the invisible and make it visible. This is the things that we've learned because a couple years ago, I think 2019, one of the things we started doing was like helping customers at least monitor. So they don't even know what's happening. All they know is that their calls aren't getting through. They don't know why. They'll check 1 phone or 2 phones, but they can't see. They've got thousands of DIDs, thousands of telephone numbers. How do you see them all? So the first thing I want you to understand that you need to have visibility, real-time visibility. You need to monitor. You need to see exactly what's happening with your numbers real time. Because if you don't, sometimes people say, I get reports once a week, and this is what happens, but it's kind of too late to make the change, right? There's also people who have come to us and say, hey, we found this company, and they said they're going to brand our numbers. This is like a year ago, whatever that meant. And they're like, hey, we paid for this. But then when we help them get real-time visibility and actually view what's happening, and we can see actually what the phone looks like, what the caller ID looks like on Verizon, T-Mobile, and AT&T, and we see that, okay, your calls are not exactly as branded as you thought. Maybe they brand you on one network, one carrier, but you've got most of your customers on another carrier. So there's a lot of things that people just don't understand. So I always say, number one, you have to get the visibility, you have to see, you have to monitor what's happening with your numbers. Number two, people say, hey, we're just gonna buy more numbers, that's the solution. That's what they say we do. Talked to a guy yesterday, said, hey, we use Twilio, we just bought the numbers, and on the same day, or within like 2 days, we even used it, the calls are coming in flagged and say, how is that? How can I buy a brand new number? I've never used it. Why would the carriers flag me as spam? Because that number has a history. That number has a track record, And unfortunately, when you're buying numbers and swapping numbers, depending on where you're going through, you don't know that the phone number has a history. So back to number one, you need visibility. So when you buy a number, if you're gonna buy some numbers, you're gonna do it, make sure you check the numbers. Look at what's happened. Has there been FTC complaints? Has there been whatever flags? See if you can figure out the history of that number. And then you've got a better chance of using that number until you blow it up and make too many phone calls and burn it out. And then number three, again, do you have clarity on the complaints and the compliance issues that happen? So these are like 3 categories I'd say that you need to understand and see what's happening so that you can get your calls through. Again, as a compliance company, we know a little bit about compliance. And so we see those things. We tie right into the FTC because that's where people make complaints sometimes to the FTC, to the do not call list, and they'll complain, and we can give people exactly, you can see in general what the complaint is that happened on your number. So you have to see this. Maybe you hired somebody to make calls for you or whatever, and you don't know what's happening. So those are the 3 things I want to make sure that you first understand. Get the visibility, understand the history, and monitor complaints. And of course, if there are complaints and compliance issues, you need to remediate. You need to fix those things internally. As I mentioned, in 2019, one of the things we started doing was just monitoring. We just began to watch, began to see it, because our customers just wanted to know what was happening with their numbers. And so we started doing that. And I think last summer, we finally began to, because it wasn't being, just because you know the problem doesn't mean you have a solution. And so people try different solutions and they weren't finding the right one. So last summer is when we began to actually work and consult and help the clients fix their numbers and do what's necessary. So the next things I'm going to cover, the next 3, 4, 5 points, that again I want you to take notes of, are the things that need to be in place. If you can monitor it, if you get visibility, then you want to go through these next couple points. So the big next category is the lack of relationships. I love lead generation and performance marketing. Nobody's here. Because there's relationships, right? It's not always about, sometimes content is great, I'm glad you're here, but a lot of the value of what you get in business is through relationships. Same thing with your phone, same thing with your numbers. Who knows you? Who knows what you're doing? Do people trust you? Do you have relationships that know that your caller ID is not a scammer, is not a spammer, is not whoever? What does that look like? So this number was a number from last year, which relates to this whole thing called stir shaking that you might have heard. And this is the date for this 70% was saying that 76% of phone calls that come through are unsigned or unattested, meaning they have no relationship. Their relationship status is unknown. And that's because the technology for stir shaking isn't fully implemented every single tower and every single carrier throughout the US. So even though it's necessary, it is important, but in general, a lot of calls are not signed, right? So we have to be aware of that. So the first relationship that relates to stir shaking, this is my simple way of saying it, there needs to be a relationship between every phone number, DID, TN, whatever you want to call it, and your service provider needs to know that your company owns this number, and that relationship needs to be established and tight. And the phone provider, whoever's sending your traffic, needs to know that. That's stirs shaken to me in a very uneducated layman's term. So again, and what you hear about this attestation level A, B, and C, which pretty much is saying, does the carrier know that they know you and they know your number and they know you to connect, or they just know that the calling party, they know it's you calling, that you're a legitimate business, but they don't understand, they're not aware that this phone number is established by you. Maybe it's being spoofed by somebody else. And then again, the letter C on the attestation level is that they don't know who the number is, they don't know who's calling or anything about it. So that's big thing, relationships. You can't just buy numbers and buy numbers and buy numbers without understanding that there's a relationship that's very clear between who you are and the number that you have. Next one is the relationship between you and the carriers, T-Mobile, Verizon, AT&T. What does that relationship look like? But again, it's not just the big three. There's all kind of other carriers that you need to have a relationship with. And a lot of people use free call registry to try to establish that relationship. They do it once, it may work, it may not work, but they don't understand that the relationship has to be maintained over and over and over again. And so a few months ago, US Telecom posted a listing of, I think, 10 to 15 to 20 different carriers and their direct email address or their website that a company, your business, needs to register with in order to try to defeat the spam issue. But there's a lot of different, so it's almost a full-time job if you want to have somebody dedicated to going through all those lists, figuring out the process, registering every number, monitoring the numbers, and if something changes, kind of mitigate that relationship to fix the number again, and things like that. So it is a job. But it's not everything. I think in the app, in the Hoover app, I saw somebody ask, is free call registry a good thing to do? It is good. It is definitely a valuable piece of the puzzle. But like I'm trying to share with you, there's more than one piece of the puzzle. But this one here is something that you need to do or that you need to have done on a regular basis. So you need a relationship between you and even the app companies. There's apps, Novo, Robo, I don't know the other ones, Novo, whatever, RoboKiller. So those apps, every one of those can be fixed through a relationship. Again, the one cool thing about us, because we're a compliance company, one of the things that we try to do for our clients, we kind of try to be that neutral, silent partner to establish relationships. So when we go to somebody for a client and try to say, hey, they're not a scammer, they're not a spammer, the big three carriers will trust us because we're a compliance company. So we're not going to just say anybody is clean and they've got good practices and policies. Because we're a compliance company, we're trusted and we have certain access and certain privileges to be able to vet certain people and establish that relationship. And it helps. It helps to make sure that you have the right people, the right partners in place. And then the last thing, of course, is you and your customers. That relationship is kind of given. Again, they need to know, if they know you, if they're expecting your call, if there is a relationship there, it is very likely that your calls will get through and things will go out better. And the one thing that's interesting, again, some people, a lot of BPOs or marketing companies, like I asked ChatGPT, if it's not my customer, right? So in that sense, right, you don't have a relationship with the customer. You're just kind of the middleman. But what does that look like? I don't know how you vet your buyer, if you understand the compliance of all the different parties who are connected in the process of getting that lead. And also goes towards the data. Sometimes you think you've got good, clean data, and you think you've got a relationship with this person. Hey, this Janaya has got an active, she's got a lead ID, whatever. It's good, it's golden, right? Have you talked to Rich, Con, heard about fraud? It's not that simple. So again, you need to validate the relationship between you and that phone number. Again, because things that we know, because we're a compliance company, we check data. We say, hey, has this phone number changed? If you're using aged data, you got the data, it's beautiful, it's great, it's got every ID and certificate of authenticity forever, but that was from 6 months ago. And people change their phone numbers. So again, you think you've got a relationship with this person, you think they want what you are giving them, but if there's a gap there, there's no real relationship, and then again, that creates an issue. And the last section is on the practices and behaviors of what you need to do specifically. What are the best practices that you and your call center director, your operations person, people that manage your dialer or manage your team, what are some of the things that you need to think about in order to make sure that your calls get through? I'm gonna take a quick squig of my triple shot, like mocha. Everybody good? Feeling good? Yeah. Awesome. We got 10 minutes. I'm flying. I don't think I'm going too fast, but I think we're doing well. See some smiles. So let's get. So here's my again rudimentary diagram, PowerPoint, clip art version of how calls are made, and some of the pieces. There's probably more in the puzzle. You got your dialer, you got settings, you got people, hoping you're compliant, you're making the calls, you got your database, and you're going through carriers, you're going through the cloud. And they have a little key in a lock, which is like my stir shaking authenticity feature there. And then you got the analytics engines, Haya and TNS, and all those who represent T-Mobile and Verizon, all those people. They get the end user. All right, so this is my little picture here. And so number one, the first principle, ideal to not look like an illegal scammer, is how many calls should you be making per DID or per phone number per day. Now, if you haven't heard this number, again, it's 70 to 80 is the ideal safe zone. And anybody that uses a dialer is probably throwing up, or their stomach is like, I can't make money with that volume of calls. We can talk about that later. But and again, remember our first step, the first principle was visibility. So all this is best practices. There's always nuances. There's no one size fits all. The first step is that you actually can see how your numbers are being flagged or not flagged. And then you kind of play around with these numbers and you find the right fit. One of the keys to get your, sometimes you don't need to buy numbers and buy numbers and buy numbers and rest them and swap them. But you might need more numbers, not to be swapped, but if you're trying to hit a certain volume of calls per day, instead of having 100 numbers and you're buying 100 every month, you may need a fixed amount of 300 numbers. I'm just making it up because you got to get this volume. So anyway, so there's some nuances that need to happen, and every customer is different. But that is rule number one: don't make too many calls per day. That's the biggest flag, and your numbers get burned. Number two is 3 calls per second. Again, some dialers have settings where you can send 5, 10, 50, I don't know that many, but 5, 10 calls at a time, fast, massive calls. 3 calls max per time is a best practice when it comes to how many calls you're making. Next one, honeypot numbers. So many people have everything right in their policies and practices, but the issue is that the data that they're actually using, they don't know that there's honeypot numbers in there. Well, that's what people tell us. When we are advocating for our clients and we're talking to carriers, we're talking to app companies, and we say, hey, this company is clean, pristine, why are you not allowing them to get their history or get their reputation of bad calling, spam removed from their account? It turns out that some of the numbers they're calling are honeypots, meaning the app company has their own bucket of hundreds of thousands of numbers that nobody should ever use. They're not listed anywhere. So only if you theoretically are inventing numbers or using a random dialer, random sequential dialer, are you going to even come up with this number. But somehow you've got this number in your database and you're calling them. And they say, hey, I don't know where they think they're getting that data from, but that phone number is our private list of numbers, that there's no access to those numbers unless you did something, non-compliant. So, and that's what they tell us. So we come back to the client and says, I know you got an active prospector certificate, it looks good, a trusted form, but there's something wrong. You may need to change some vendors, change some partners, you need to clean it up. If you need us to check the phone number, check that it's real, things like that. It happens. Next is gonna be complaints. If there's a lot of complaints, you got a question? Sure, let's go. Table number 10.
So, I'm sorry?
No, sorry, go ahead.
Okay, so I
Hold on.
own a tax resolution firm.
Okay, you got a mic.
Test.
We got 6 minutes and we're almost
All right.
done, so.
Well, my name is Scott Curley. I'm CEO of a tax resolutions firm. Pretty sizable one, about the 4th largest in the country.
Yeah.
And we have, most of our calls are inbound, but I've been toying with the idea of, well, not I've been toying, we're doing it now. We have a small division that is doing outbound lead gen, right? So I've hired folks, I got them on a script, and the missing piece is accurate and quality data. Yeah. And so one of the, I came in like halfway through, so if this is not your lane, please forgive me. But we're hearing that so much, what you just talked about. Supposedly the people on this list have filled out some type of survey or through CoReg or whatever, and clicked the box that said that they have a tax problem, right? Now, however, when we get those 85% of the people who outbound folks call, they say, I didn't do that, I don't have a tax problem, take me off your list. And that is the missing piece, and I've been struggling and frustrated with this piece of it, because I know when we get this right, we'll be off to the races with this effort. But you got anything to throw at me on that?
No, it's a great question. It is a known issue. People I meet here are asking about how do I find trusted providers. Again, it's not what we do. Again, I can vet people. I work with some clients, say, hey, we've got this partner. Can you help me to do an audit on them and see what they're doing? I don't know what your process looks like, how you verify their creatives, there's a process to find the right vendors and things like that. So, but there's no simple answer. It is a known issue, but it just takes time to find the right people and know how to people. Huh?
How do you find it? Because I throw about, it's not a lot, maybe $2,000 or $3,000 a week away looking for them, and I don't know the right questions to ask. I'm not a bad guy. I'm a tax resolution firm. We help people with tax problems. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, no, we can talk. I can give you our script or our checklist of what I would say, ask this. I can give you a list of things to vet an individual. Again, when you're here, anybody here sell data?
There you go.
They're
gonna come at me like.
Okay, yeah, I'm just saying, but again, we put on compliance events. So the people that hang out and talk about compliance, I don't know, Troutman, is that today? So there's a guy talking, Eric Troutman speak today about TCPA compliance. So the people who are connected to him or connected to attorneys, it gets better and better and better. The people who live compliance. So that's all I can say. Again, we can talk later, and I can share with some people that I know. But yeah, great question. It's a known problem, and it's just part of it. I'm saying cost of doing business, but it is something that we're all trying to work on finishing or figuring out. So I've got 3 minutes. I've got just a couple more things that I want to cover. The answer rate. 20%, again, this is best practice. I know a lot of companies that have 5% answer rates, 3% answer rates, and they're making money. They're getting through. It's not ideal, but these are just the best practices, the best numbers if you want, to get your calls through on a more consistent basis. Low average call time, which was 5 seconds? Yeah, 6 seconds. Ashley, can you raise your hand? So Ashley, she works with us. She came from a dialer, and she's a great person to talk to if you have questions specifically about how we do this. But your calls, 6 seconds is the lowest that you need to average. Okay? If your data, you're making all these calls and using a dialer, and even if they're compliant, but you're making all these calls and there's an average of 2 seconds talk time, 2 seconds, that is a flag, that is a sign that your calls are not wanted, there's something about your data is not right, and that makes your deliverability go down. Disconnected lines, it's kind of clear. It's just like doing email marketing. You don't email marketing. If you got a bunch of bad emails, you'll get immediately shut down. Same thing with phone calls. If you're grabbing data and those numbers, you're not checking if they're connected. Again, if it's age data, most likely the numbers are good if you got them in the last 30 days. But if it's 60 days, a year, longer than that, the risk of it being the wrong number, a disconnected number increases. And then irregular call patterns, which is it can be confusing, right? They say, I bought this number, I need to warm it up. Or somebody says, I use it and I max it out completely, and then I have to turn it off and I call the number. So there's all this optimization, testing, split testing the way you make your phone calls. If it looks like a scammer, if it's irregular call patterns versus something steady, constantly doing a certain type of calling, that's a little bit more trusted. So we've got a minute left. I think I'll jump to, but that's it. But again, so these things, again, you can definitely reach out to Ashley. We've got a booth in Exhibit Hall if you have more questions, dnc.com is our site summarized. If you need to have real-time visibility of what actually is happening, because as you test, and we've had research companies, a lot of people do not follow all these practices, but they find their own way to make it work. There's nuances. You need trusted relationships. Allow us to be a trusted relationship for you, as well as all the other partners that you have. The way you manage your dialer. I used to have a lot of case studies about clients, and what we've seen as we've worked through all these steps. In general, our developer just said, hey, this is the average look of a client that says, my calls aren't getting through. How do I get it fixed? It starts off with the numbers at the top, and then it drops down almost to zero. Within 30 days is like the normal of what happens when we work through all these steps and we continue to work through. It's an ongoing process to get it to work. Visibility, relationships, good data, good compliance. And I will say one last thing, that if you have all these things in place and you still want to reach your customers, and it's your customers, because it doesn't work if you're calling for other people, you might want to look into branding your name on the actual display. And this is a new thing for 2023. There eventually will be logos. There will eventually be more fancy stuff with Apple and Android on phones. There's going to be more developments and technology options when it comes to branding who you are on your number, if you actually want them to know who you are. Some people do not want the customers to know who they are. They want a phone number. They don't want a brand name. But if you do, we have a solution for this as well. Other people have solutions. Make sure it's all 3 carriers. Again, we can help you with that. My time is up. Appreciate you for your time and for being awake and alert. Thank you for the one question. And have a good rest of your day.
All right. Great job, Arvell. Let's give a round of applause. Excellent information. Appreciate it. Great job. I want to move on. We're going to, we had a lot of conversation yesterday about AI. We're going to keep that going a little bit today. And part of it was touched on about how to implement it into your business. And I've got my old friend, Ethan Ewan, that's going to come up. We've known each other for probably 17 years maybe now. And so it's a pleasure to have him be a part of today and be able to share his insights on how executives today can implement AI into their organization. So Ethan, come on up, and if you can give a round of applause for Ethan, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you. You guys can hear me okay? Check, okay. Yeah, it's funny because Mike, I was just last night, I was with somebody and they're talking about, the old timers and all these things. I was like, whoa, let's curb the talk on the old,